Bayonetta is one of those games that was extremely polarizing on release. Not necessarily because of the hypersexualization of the main character, because, to be honest, if you're complaining about Bayonetta's well-rounded plot and perfect learning curves, you probably haven't played God of War. I mean, Kratos is basically a woman's wet dream, big buff guy running around half naked while doing the mythological equivalent of paying child support. And yes, the revolutionary sex gameplay. Well, Bayonetta doesn't have that at least, but one quick look on your local search engine will have you entrenched in more Rule 34 than my Taxes 2014 hard drive. No, Bayonetta was a simpler game from a simpler time, long before gamergate, long before girls, jocks, and got into the gaming scene. This was basically just the developers making Devil May Cry with a female main character, which makes a lot of sense since the director, Hideki Kamiya, is not only well known for being the most savage man on Twitter, but also for directing the original Devil May Cry, so it draws more inspirations from that title than the previously mentioned God of War that everyone around the time of release seemed to compare Bayonetta to. I mean, really, if this is like God of War, then where are my sex scene QTEs?
Come now, Cheshire, look at me. Do I look like I have any interest in children? Now making them, well, that's another story.
Anyway, Bayonetta is actually much more than just TNA, and if that puts you off the game, then you'll unfortunately miss a deep and complex gaming experience. Really, Bayonetta is basically a poster child of the action series, and fans of these kind of games will feel right at home here, even down to the ingratiating score deductions for slow completion rates, item usage, and not landing random QTEs that show up on the screen when you least expect. Damn it! Okay, that's where my first problem with this game comes in. If you're gonna make a game, you generally want to include some improvements or differences in the genre that separate yours from the pack, and if the mutation is a good one, it can be used in future games to improve the genre itself. Why does Bayonetta have practically every little annoying detail that every other action game has? The ridiculous load screens every single time you die punish you twice because not only are they slower than Duke Nukem Forever's development cycle, they also take a huge amount of points away from your mission score. Even on the recently released PC version, you spent agonizing moments looking at the same animation of a dead Bayonetta when we could be spending that time actually playing the game. It's not even loading anything most of the time and just showing off these lame animations over and over as if the developers that re-released it decided that this was a cool feature. I mean, who playtested this?
Your fights are yours alone. I'm only here to watch my handiwork in action, so don't get any bright ideas about coming to me for help.
No, you get one thing straight. I'm not the slightest bit interested in the fact that you made these guns. If you get in my way, I will... How do the Americans put it? Oh yes, bust a cap in yo ass.
Right on, baby. Right on.
Not only that, but one of the gripes I've had with almost all action games is the whole item usage system. Why go through the effort of implementing a crafting system, putting all this art and design time into creating unique items, coding all of them, and then making absolutely sure that the player never wants to use the system? Seriously, it seems like the most annoying thing to tease a player with the illusion of option, when more often than not the best course of action is simply to tough it out and not use any items. If you're more like me, then you might even decide that you'd rather restart the entire level than use an item and possibly ruin you. God damn it! Okay, so the item system basically sucks and the game is pretty slow at times, but it's still pretty deep and complex. There's a bunch of combos to learn that are documented in the menus, but since no one is actually going to spend the 10 minutes it takes to load these menus, memorize the combos, exit the menus, and try them, you're much more likely to learn them in the heat of battle while happily mashing away your controller like a Smash Bros. World champ. As much as documentation that the game does have, some of the stuff is honestly confusing. Most of the items at the Gates of Hell, where you augment Bayonetta, often aren't explained beyond a flavor text one-liner, and this is a serious problem if you spent the last few missions collecting currency to spend it on a gamble of an item. It's possible to load and reload the game if you get something you don't like, or look it up online, but I shouldn't need an encyclopedia when all the game does need to do is add an additional line or two of explanation. It's all a weird system that feels like the developers didn't spend enough time with the focus groups to realize that there were some systems, like the bat dodge, that were honestly more confusing to grasp than the plot of the game itself. Seriously, I shouldn't need to go to the demonic Wikipedia to check what my Yamato sword does. And speaking of plot, nah, not that one. This game makes about as much sense as a Kingdom Hearts script. The game starts off with showing some people in a cemetery, and then BAM! Really tall girl was praying for some reason, and then BAM! The girl turns out to be Bayonetta, and then BAM! She's fighting angels for some reason, and then Most of the game's plot doesn't make sense, and that's about as plainly as you could put it. By the time I had been over halfway through the game, I had completely abandoned any hope that this plot would resolve itself or make any kind of sense until the end, but thankfully the fun mechanics kept me motivated to continue playing because, putting it in plain terms, it was just damn good gameplay. Another point is the characters. Bayonetta herself is sexy and commanding, rarely losing her cool and being a truly powerful female protagonist, which is somewhat itself rather rare in video games. Funnily enough, they also made the character so tall that it's basically impossible for Bayonetta to run without looking like one of those guys you see on stilts at a circus. Luca is more of an annoyance than anything else in the story, being a rather generic character, and Jean, who is clearly the Virgil to Bayonetta's Dante, feels uninspired in her design. It was obvious from the interaction of the characters that Bayonetta had much more development time put towards her character than the rest of the cast, and while this isn't necessarily a problem, skipping a little bit too much on the other characters in the game can leave the story feeling rather flat and unimpactful. Hell, Bayonetta has such an overwhelming focus on her that she's literally two different characters in the same story.
I'll help you out of here, but that's all. And you have to promise there'll be no crying. A single tear and you'll be crying alone. Got it?
Okay, Mummy.
The child is pretty damn cute though. As for the gameplay, it's actually pretty good. There's a depth to this game that is pure fun to master, and once you get good, you can pull off some truly spectacular moves. There's no dial-up combo as enemy attacks come in often and are quite dangerous on the normal difficulty and above, so you'll do plenty of dodging mid-combo, which even allows you to continue your combo if you learn how to hold at your previous combo during the dodge. Witch Time, which activates every time you narrowly dodge an attack, slows down the enemies around you and gives you some breathing room as well as time to lay the smackdown on your foes and gain an upper hand if you're feeling surrounded. Performing a perfectly timed dodge with the purchased Bat Dodge ability extends Witch Time to greater levels, allowing you to do even more Witch Time damage. There's a variety of weapons the game throws at you, ranging from kitty claws to a cool whip to a katana and even a lightsaber that gives players the choice to progress and play through the game in their own unique ways. It also adds lots of replayability with the upgrades that are available and higher difficulty modes, as well as plenty of secrets you'll unlock on a second playthrough that you couldn't necessarily get the first time. One final note is the amount of cool little references and nods towards other media that you don't notice unless you're keyed in on what's going on. It's not over the top, with a healthy amount of Devil May Cry references too, like Antonio Redgrave, who is Luca's father, and also the name Dante used in Devil May Cry, as well as a bunch of lore ties putting the two games unofficially in the same canonical universe. There's so many references in this game that some of them still haven't been spotted even years later. Take a look at this for example.
So, this is supposed to be paradise?
Despite its flawed story, genre-defying annoyances, and the quick-time events that leave something to be desired in the cutscenes, Bayonetta's core gameplay is fast, frenetic, and absolutely awesome. Anyone who is a traditional gamer and lover of action titles will feel right at home with this game, from the first moments where Bayonetta is revealed, while tackling the Angels of Paradiso to an upbeat musical track, to the mastery of the game's nuances, such as the Bat Dodge for additional Witch Time, and the challenges that lay hidden throughout the game, rewarding a victorious player with additional power-ups, magic abilities, and all-new weapons. There's plenty of variety to Bayonetta, plenty of skill ceiling, and plenty of fun in this game, and it's all indicative of the amount of sheer passion this project has put into it. If you haven't played the game yet, it's available on PC as of recently, so I'd definitely go and pick up a copy and play the scantily clad sorcerers from hell.